All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. If you are in the market to buy a home, this could be one of the most important videos to watch. Today, we're going to discuss what the perfect storm of the home buying process would look like. If you had the perfect situation to go out looking for a home, and then we'll map to what our current market looks like, and then what you would want, maybe in the future, the attributes associated to it being, kind of that buyer's market that you would want. So we'll talk about things that are obvious, low prices, low interest. We'll get into some of the details that might not be and aren't likely so obvious. But then we'll also get into some kind of once in a lifetime type of situations that we might not see again, and how that could play into you benefiting from as close as we can get to the perfect storm. With that, I'll bring in my co-host Chase Hodgson. How you doing today, Chase?
I'm doing amazing, Jared. How are you today, my friend?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I always love jumping on these with you, talking through things, and trying to share
Good day.
what's
I'm
going on with,
excited.
with our business.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good day to do it. I haven't been as excited to chat about the market and what's going on in a long time as I am today.
We did delay a little bit today because you were waiting on some information. So for those of you that watch out for us on our normal time, we did push it out a little bit to have this portion of the conversation with the most current information. So
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Well, very cool. Well, let me get some housekeeping items out of the way here. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Jerod Lee. I'm the associate broker and team lead here at My Home Connection, also known as MHC Realty. Our sponsor for today is the perfect home buying process. We've spent the better part of the last couple of decades putting this together to make the home buying process as efficient, as low cost, and hopefully fun along the way. We also like to think informative, educational as well. So we've developed a lot of tools that you can benefit from podcasts that we send out to answer, a lot of the questions that you're going to have. We'd love to share inside secrets that might not otherwise be divulged, so that people become more and more familiar with, what the inside of our business looks like. We have a almost 100-page lifestyle and relocation guide to familiarize yourself with the area. And then, of course, for the data-driven folks, we've got a lot of reports. And then, of course, your standard, home property searches, things like that. So feel free to reach out to us anytime to talk about. Oh, and I'm sorry, we do currently have a promotion going with Chase in regards to bringing up to $500 on the appraisal of your home, as well as up to $500 on your home inspection paid out at closing. So you've got a number of things to benefit from. So, yeah, you saw my bring Chase back on here. You saw my list of all the things that if I was a buyer, I would want to go. Uh, I would want to be present in my home buying process. So let's have some fun with it, and then we'll throw
Yeah.
in a splash of realism and in the process.
Okay. I like it. I like it.
Yeah, let's chat about kind of the first ones that are pretty obvious. Is hey, I'd want my price to be uh, the least and that I can pay. And most people of any recent time are looking at the mortgage meltdown in 08, 09, saying, hey, I would have loved to have bought right when values dropped off the cliff. We've talked at great length, though, in the past about that was a very hyper unique situation and not likely to ever happen again, because a lot of the things that initially caused it have been taken care of in our industry to prevent such a catastrophic event.
Yeah, you're much more optimistic than I. No, not, I shouldn't say optimistic. I'm just saying that looking back on that, I there was definitely some government policy that allowed that. I think us agents and the appraisers, or agents like yourself and appraisers like I was at the time, took a lot of the heat for that when maybe not necessarily should have taken as much as we got. So
Somebody had to take the blame, right? The
we
smaller guy
did.
usually that doesn't yell as loud as the rest usually gets drowned out. Is that?
That's right. That's right. That's right. We don't want to. Yeah. got to be careful where you put that blame.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess what I was leading up to is if you as a buyer are expecting for values to drop that much again, it's not going to happen. Now, what I will say is, depending on when you're watching this episode, we have had, what I'll call an adjustment or a correction in our market over the last year because our values were overflated. People were throwing briefcases of cash around. Prices went up very aggressively. And now, over the last 12 plus months, things have corrected back to where they should be. So, as far as them coming down, they have, it's just probably, well, I hate to throw out estimates because every market's going to be a little different, but fairly significantly and not likely to go much, if any, lower. So you're kind of
Yeah.
buying it in the valley.
And it's, yeah, and terminology I think here is super important too, Jerod, and it's what you were alluding to, right? Like, so if you took a trend line on appreciation in real estate over time, it goes out at about a 45. If you have the scale, it goes out at about a 45. Well, the trend, the line of real estate will go above and below that at times, depending on what's going on in the economy. And you're right, we had overinflated, right, because we had low supply and massive demand, and so we saw that big bubble jump from the traditional trend line, and that adjustment we've seen is back down to normal, to what would be for where Idaho was trending prior to COVID and all that nonsense.
Yeah. So if you're going to time the lowest prices, we anticipate that you're there, and that values are going to go up, more commensurate to what we've seen historically from our trend lines, going forward.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You always want to buy low and sell high, right? Like in real estate is very, unless you're willing to not own, it's pretty dang tough to do that, right?
Right.
Like you can, because you typically you're buying and selling at pretty much the same time,
Yeah.
unless you're just strictly investing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so selling high and buying low is pretty tough to do. And whether it's, I think we talked about this last week, whether it's the stock market or whatever you're investing in, it is next to impossible to actually time the bottom. So if it's right for you, it's the right time.
Yeah. And we'll get into what the more important thing to be looking at is where our interest rates and how that could potentially adjust.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Which
Big day for
ultimately,
that.
yeah, exactly. So the other piece that I just wanted to throw in here is, a lot of markets will have like seasonal times where they're getting the best value. Right here, kind of middle winter, people are looking for holidays. Weather's not so good. If you are going to get a reduction in price, or what we'll cover later are seller concessions or promotions. Usually, it's kind of the middle of winter. So if you're okay at moving at that time of the year, that's when you would want to look.
Yeah. Yeah. Very seasonal here with the winters. You could set your clock by what happens to the real estate market in the winter.
Yeah, and I would say for those of you that are specifically looking at our market here in the Treasure Valley, we've always kind of had a strong market. The winters are just not the strongest.
Yes.
And then sometimes we didn't even skip a beat, right? You couldn't tell the difference through any of the the four seasons because we just stayed strong all year. So that's not always the case, but if you're really trying to time it,
that would be as close as you get, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's get into I'm going to see your eyes light up here talking about interest rates because that's what we were waiting on today.
Yes.
Everybody wants not only the low price, but the extremely low interest rate. And we've been talking about this for a minute. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah. So, we've had, with everything that's going on, the Fed tries to combat that by their policy and how they deal with things. They try to help control the economy and pricing and in our industry. And so we've been waiting because many of us in the market have felt like, and even as of late, you've heard a bunch of the Fed chairs from around the country also chime in saying that, the Fed policy currently is over restrictive, right? For the market that we're in. And it has been very restrictive, and it's held interest rates up artificially, over the past, I'd say you could go back as far as a year. The Fed likes to typically act slowly, they act, yeah, they act slowly, right? Because they don't want to overheat or overcool an economy. And so they tend to be, cautious in that realm. And today, though, we finally got the Fed funds rate cut that we've been watching for, with which, really should we help us generate momentum in the bond market, and therefore, reduce interest rates. We've been on an amazing trend over the past, year and a half. And of the last 6 months, that trend line's really started to spike up. And so we've seen a pretty massive reduction in interest rates, and that trend looks to be continuing, and this should just further that. And
Yeah.
so a big day. Like, we've been waiting and waiting for the past 3 or 4 months. We've been expecting it. And so it's a big move, and it should help us nationally, and also here in our local market a ton.
So there's two perspectives you can look at this, and that is, if you're talking to us right now, interest rates have been going down. Good for you. They're going down even further. Your timing, that perfect storm scenario is happening. But if you wait too long, our inventory, which we'll get into later, is still low, and we've got a lot of pent up demand, meaning we see a lot of people looking at our market, ready to pounce. And guess what happens when
Yep.
interest rates go down? They start to pounce. And now, as demand picks up, right on the heels of that is going to become values, right? Prices
Right.
go up. So, if you want that perfect storm, I think it's coming. Um,
Yeah.
Chase and I will fully admit we're not going to see twos and threes. Uh,
It's pretty unrealistic, right? Like, so, I always catch myself because nobody's got a crystal ball. We can't tell you exactly what's going to happen. What we can do is use the historical data and try to determine from that information the best, right? Like, what the best course of action is for you, and what is going to happen. Um, but I also never thought that I would say, I would get a client in a 2.6 or 2.7 interest rate, and I did that quite a bit a couple of years back. So I don't
Thank
I don't
you.
want
Love
to
you,
say
brother.
never. You're very welcome.
Twos,
I
man. I
don't.
was squawking about where I was at. Is it going to get any better? I'm embarrassed to say.
So I don't want to say never, but it's highly unlikely, right? Like, for our market, if we got down into the mid fours, realistically, that's about where we were before all of this started. So if we got down into the high of the mid fours, that would just be fantastic.
Yeah.
It'd be, real estate Disneyland, if you if you want to
Yeah. Real
want to
estate, I love
really.
it.
Yeah. So it's I mean, it's an election year, and everybody knows, it doesn't matter what side you're on, there's a ton of volatility, right? And
Yeah.
that's going to translate into our economy. That's going to translate into our stock markets and our bond markets and our treasury markets, and all of that affects interest rates. And so it's not like it's going to be, oh man, rates are going to drop 2 points tomorrow. We could see some big moves in either direction depending on how the market feels on that day. And so, to clarify just a little bit, the Fed funds rate, that's the interest rate at which banks trade to one another on a daily basis, right? The Fed sets that. How they react obviously affects how they lend. And so, what affects mortgage rates? And I'm pretty sure I've said this. Man, most days I feel like a broken record because I get into things that I like to say that's that I'm used to saying. But there's only really one thing that affects mortgage rates, and that's the mortgage-backed security market. And unfortunately, everything affects that. It's just like the stock market. People's needs and wants and feelings and fears and all of that goes into how we buy and sell in the market. But all of this is positive, right? So this Fed funds rate cut should generate positivity in the market, which will, you'll see people investing in the bond market again. Typically, when that happens, treasuries go down, and then mortgage rates as well will fall as people invest more and more in the bond market.
Yeah, I think you're spot on by just saying, look, yes, be thankful that it's going down, but I think that I put the rate, piece in here because
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about values, prices being, down. But even if they go down a little bit more, you're dating that. You're not, whatever price you buy the home at, that's fixed. The rate that
Yeah.
you're mortgages that's associated to the purchase of the home can change. So even if it only goes down, a little bit now, 3, 6, 9, 12 months later, whatever, right? Project into the future, the rates can go down and benefit from that now new rate, whatever that might be. If you get lucky enough to get back into the threes and maybe twos, great. But we do not anticipate values going lower. What's that?
Yeah, just be comfortable with where you are. Like if it makes sense for you now, then it makes sense, right? You can deal with the rest of it in the future, but you don't start building wealth. You don't start building equity and creating wealth through owning real estate until you buy.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So let's move on to in a perfect world as a buyer, I've got a lot of inventory to pick from, right? I got areas of town to look at. I got single family homes and condos and townhouses. I would say certainly in our market and even nationally, we all know that we've been struggling with a shortage of inventory for homes. But right now, before the demand picks up, because we do anticipate demand picking up because the interest rates are going down. So you don't want to pause too long because those that are going to jump on it as the rates go down, the inventory is going to get consumed. You're going to get frustrated at lack of availability of homes. And as I mentioned, on the heels of that is almost always typically values going up again.
Yeah. I think we live in a pretty interesting time right now, as we have for the past 3 to 5 years, right?
Yeah.
But we're still dealing with some of the ramifications of that. When they cut off supply chain and and all these things piled up and all this fear, builders slowed down. And there is a bunch of multifamily hitting markets across the nation, which will help alleviate some of that demand. But until that gets caught up, we're still going to have demand, and in this, you have to have some way to offset that, right? So it's just basic economic principle. When you have low supply and high demand, prices go up to price some people out of the market, and then you get back to that situation where demand equals supply. And so we're in an interesting space to where I think, I don't think supply is quite as short as it was, right, going into COVID, but we still don't have a ton of supply. And so as as these rates continue down, and I say continue because we, like you talk about, Jerod, traffic's going to tick up. We've already seen that, off the register, from one of the groups that I follow, they're 2 points up traffic over the last month. We're seeing a pretty big increase in mortgage applications and things of that nature, and so we're seeing that traffic already. And now with this funds rate cut and more positivity in the market, rates come down even further. It's there's really no end to what that traffic could end up being, and so even though we have been able to increase inventory over the past 12 months a little bit, right? That's not going to last if everybody jumps back into the market that's been sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So, we've have other episodes that talk about the difference between why you buy a new construction home and an existing or resale home, just to give you an idea of kind of how our terminology goes. So, in our market, we haven't had a lot of big national builders. That's, among other reasons, high demand, a lot of people relocating into the area. We haven't had the resources of large national builders to come in and build homes. We are seeing some enter into our market. The existing resale market is going to be tougher because of the low interest rates.
Yeah, you've got how many people locked in at in the 2s and the 3s.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I'd be crazy.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, I just heard a statistic, and I haven't been able to vet this yet, but I heard and I'm trying to remember where I heard it, but typically on average, the amount of time that people stay in their home has been decreasing. Like it was for a long time, it was like 5 to 7 years. I've talked to people that's clientele are showing at least 3.5 years is as long as they stay in their home. And I heard a statistic the other day that we can look at 14 years. Like that's a massive jump. And that solely has to be on the fact that you got an interest rate that low.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot to pull me out of my rate just because you know, one,
Well,
what am I going to buy? Am I going to double, triple my rate? Anyway, so all I'm pointing out is, in a perfect storm, you'd have a lot of inventory to pick from. You're probably not going to have a lot on the resale side of things, the existing home market, because of what we're just describing.
yep.
So there's a lot of benefit to look into new construction, and we've talked about the reasons why you would look at that over resale. But the other thing, in a perfect storm, you'd have low demand, right? You're not competing with other people. You can go look at homes. You can think on it for a weekend, a week, maybe a month, right? We used to have homes on the market pretty comfortably, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And you had some time to think about it, right? That would be the perfect scenario. The two things to think about the low demand is before interest rates start dropping significantly, if you're thinking about buying a home, jump on it before everybody else.
Yeah.
And again, we talked about winter, people kind of backing off. But in the spring, certainly summer, that's when everybody's like, they can swap schools, weather's nicer. The demand is just going to be higher. So you're going to be competing with more people, potentially having less inventory.
Yeah. Or as interest rates come down, more and more people get back into the buy. I think there's a statistic out there that for every 1% drop in interest rate, 5 million more people become eligible to purchase a home.
Think of that number. Every 1%, 5 million home buyers be more aggressive about getting into the market.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's, no matter how much you increase your inventory, and there's still a lot of reasons that people move, right? And whether it's moving states and jobs and all of that stuff, like there is so much pent up demand. And the other thing that and I can't remember if we've ever talked about this on this podcast before, but we actually are experiencing the largest cross section of home buyers in this country that we've ever had. Maybe many of you younger folks may not know this, but prior to that, the baby boomers were the biggest population in the United States as far as consumers and buying and selling and all that. But with this end of the millennials and beginning of Gen Z, I think it is, right, is where we're at. They outpace them by like 10 million.
Yeah.
And so we've never had the homes. When you talk about lack of inventory, we've just straight up as a nation never had enough product to fill that need.
Yeah.
And so everybody's behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. So your time now before demand starts coming on is good. So, and we'll, talk you through all of these kind of again, this is a perfect storm scenario. But there's going to be times where a lot of this comes together, maybe not all of it comes together for you. We'll talk you through where you're at in that process. Let's chat about builder and seller promotions, right? So if the demand is low and sellers want to sell, so you got a builder building a new construction home or a seller wanting to sell theirs, builders will extend to you promotions, which are seller concessions, but they call it promotions, right? It usually depends on the price of the home that you're buying, right? You get maybe $20,000 for a $400,000 home. You get a $25,000 promotion for a $450,000 home, so on and so forth. Builders will give you that towards a number of things, whether it's, things in the house that don't normally come with it, from blinds to refrigerator to backyard to fence to, kind of name it here. But the biggie is interest rates.
Yeah.
So if you've got interest rates going down and you've got a seller, especially a builder that's being hyper aggressive in their promotion, buying it down even more, they could be temporary or they could be permanent. Temporary, just like it sounds. But man, if you're already getting a good rate and the builder's throwing a lot of money at you to buy it down even more, you could be positioned really well.
Yeah, you could. And I'm a little worried. If I'm going to be completely honest, I'm a little worried after today's move, we could quickly see those go away. Right?
Because demand picks up, they're selling inventory, promotions go away.
100%. And so, we've always kind of expected to see those through till spring. And now I'm not so sure. That was a big move that the Fed made today, which really could affect affect what sellers are willing to contribute to the transaction. So it'll be interesting to see in the upcoming days, but that's been our saving grace over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
The fact that they're willing to help cover closing costs and things like that, because we've, sellers or buyers are trying to buy with a higher interest rate and a higher cost of a home.
Yeah.
And so that has been a very big factor in a lot of folks being able to qualify.
Yeah. And you just touched on, well, for two reasons. One is their ability to qualify, but, minimizing your upfront costs, right? What am I taking out of my pocket today, right? They have to cover the down, but the seller can help with closing costs, any number of prepaids and costs like that. So if you want to minimize it or even don't have it to give it, it could be the difference between being able to buy and not.
Yeah, and it's something I like to focus on in my business a lot. When you're dealing with a lot of first timers, it's an uneasy feeling to put someone in a home with no reserves, little to no reserves, right? Because they don't know what the expenses are. They don't know what they're going to have to deal with, especially if it's not a new home where they don't have the builder warranty. There can be a lot of things come up. And so, those reserves can be really important to a homeowner for sure.
Yeah. And one of the things we talk about in our, new construction versus resale episode is the cost associated to, depending on what price point you buy in. Maybe it doesn't have sprinklers, maybe it doesn't have sod, maybe it doesn't have fence. For folks that need that, they got dogs, they've got little kids or what have you, that's going to come out of your pocket. But now with these promotions, you can get a lot of that stuff without having to buy the home and then put more into the home.
Right.
Always
Yep, absolutely.
cringe when I'm driving through a subdivision and they've got sheets up as blinds.
Yeah.
Because that's, kind of the last thought.
Yeah.
Like, oh, oops.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. Right. No, and that happens because first time home buyers don't know. Like they just don't know what they don't know. And it's not a dumb thing. It's not anything, but there is so much that goes on in the purchase of a home and a lot that everybody has to worry about, and your buyers are stressed out and you just, that's why I'm saying, like, you want the reserves, or you want to be able to use that money towards concessions. And again, plug, but working with the right people to help you remember those things during the transaction.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Take this into consideration. And then the seller concession piece, obviously resale, and one of the benefits we talk about, it's existing, right? Like blinds are there, yards there, typically, not always. But, their demand on their home they're trying to sell is low. So they're entertaining providing a credit to you at closing. Now, we've also got other podcasts in how it is now that the commission for the buyer's agent is paid differently, and the onus is now on the buyer. But the fact that we can often, not always, get that from the seller. So that's a seller concession as well. So if you're thinking about down, closing costs, and all these other costs, and then you're not sure if you're going to get the seller concession for the buyer's agent, now you have some ability to negotiate that during the offer, where when it strengthens, you might not.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty, as we move into winter and spring here, I think it's going to be pretty cut and dried how these things go, barring any ginormous upsets. Like I say, it's trending super well. And so I think, we see these go away or drastically reduced here in the next month or two. And then as interest rates trend down and more buyers in the market, like it's, I know that, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here on this a little bit, Jerod, so apologize if I do. I know that we're trying to get to the point of, there's a perfect storm, and you just want to check as many of those boxes as you can, because you're the chances of you buying when everything's perfect are slim to none. And so, right now there's as many of those boxes checked as I've seen in a very long time.
Yeah, there's a couple things I want to talk about. One is, if you're a buyer, let's give you the 30,000 foot view. If it could be perfect, here's all the boxes checked. By the way, as we look at where we're at in time, the things that have happened, we're as close as we're going to be.
Yeah.
For some people's buying process, they need certain check boxes more than other check boxes. Hey, I would have loved for inventory to be higher, but I really need that seller concession to pull this together. So I
Right.
won't get both, but the one that I need, we'll talk you through. Is that a box that's often checked
Right.
when you're buying,
Right.
or you know what, we got to wait. If you're asking me in spring, where the market's hot for that seller concession, and because you need it, it may or may not be an option. But if we wait till later in the year, we get some credit cleaned up, we get some savings set aside, and we buy in winter, there might be a higher degree of likelihood that the seller is gonna help you out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's pretty interesting to me as we reach this point, with where we're at in the market, and I I don't want to be I told you so guy, right? Definitely don't. But we've been watching everything pretty closely, right? Like you can never predict 100% what's going on. And as I say this, the ticker on my on my bond market it's jumping up and down, right? With the news from today and the volatility we're experiencing. But you can never tell exactly what's going on, what's going to happen. But I've listened, over the past, I don't know, 8 months to a year about, oh no, here comes '08. You and I've talked about it, right? How people think it's going to crash and it's going to bottom out again. Um, and what we've seen over that time is exactly the opposite, right? Through one of the worst markets we've experienced since '08, we've seen year over year appreciation of 5%.
Yeah.
It went up just like you and I talked about when this all started. Like in a typical recessive period, real estate doesn't go down. It either flatlines or it slows its increase. So we slowed our increase down quite a bit, from, I think we were seeing 12s and 14s before that. Isn't that right, Jerod? Like just crazy numbers.
Yeah.
And so we normalized more to 5%. And here in Idaho, we typically run contrary to the rest of the market a little bit. And that was the case. Like we continued at that upward trend. And so things have been good. And that number that you can look at to justify that as negative equity, right? That's when people are upside down in their homes. And there's, what was it like? Gosh, as I think back, maybe 1.7%, I think, 1.9 or 1.7% of all mortgages have negative equity, right? So where's the rush of short sales, right? On average, homes with mortgages have $200,000 worth of equity that they can tap into.
Yeah.
And now as interest rates come down and it's more affordable to tap into that equity, if you have debt or you're struggling or whatever, you can solve that problem through a refinance or whatever that may be for your situation. But I'm just saying, like, you can't like knee jerk and react to what's going on. You have to look at the trends and historic data to try to make the best decision that you can. And those of us that have been watching that are right. Like this, it's taken longer to get here than we thought it would. But everything that we've talked about for the last 2 years is happening.
Yeah. 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 Well, so we're about the half an hour mark. So let's talk about the other one, in a perfect storm. And this won't last certainly forever, but we have kind of a perfect storm of the ability to assume loans. We have a full podcast specifically about this where we get into much greater detail, but I'll try to map it out in that at the time that people were buying a couple, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, those folks could need to move. We're helping some folks move, military. They have a VA loan at an extremely low interest rate. That's assumable. And by the way, as we talked about, doesn't necessarily need to be a veteran that assumes that. And we get into the details of that. But the other interesting part is because those were, probably once in a lifetime low rates, the values didn't go up, where usually it makes it harder or impossible to assume a loan because the value went up so high from what they financed it for. You have to make up the difference. And some people just can't do that.
Right. As the home appreciates, right? It's what they owe on it and what they can sell the home for. That gap gets larger and larger and larger, which is the gap that you have to make up.
Yeah.
right? And in some situations that has to be cash. You can't be a second on a home or something like that, like a VA, like so as that gap gets bigger, it's harder to make that work, right? And then also, if they're selling and they can get $200,000 or $300,000 or whatever more than what they owe on it, why do they even want to mess with an assumable when they can just outright sell it
Right.
in a seller's market, which is what we're shifting back to.
Yeah. Yeah. So, again, the rates had never been lower. The values didn't jump up super fast in a shorter period of time. So that's a unique, kind of situation, that perfect storm that we're just not going to see again. So I see people being able to take advantage of that for the next, year, maybe two, depending on how much our market appreciates. But that's a great way to get into a low interest rate with minimizing your out of pocket. So
yeah, and I think those situations, even over the next 3 to 4 months, will reduce drastically, just because they're not super easy transactions in the first place. Especially when you're coming, talking about VA loans and stuff like that. It just, if they can sell it as we shift back to a seller's market, I think they're probably just going to do that because it's an easier, as far as timing and everything for them moving across the country or to a different city.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we covered a lot of territory, a lot of information, but I hope that everybody hears, our ability to kind of identify what's working for you as a buyer, what might not be working. We believe this is a unique period in time where for a lot of buyers it's going to make a lot of sense, and we be really excited to help you see what we can do to help.
Yeah, can I touch on one more point here really
Absolutely.
quickly? Just for those of you that have purchased in the last couple of years and your interest rate may be higher, you're getting probably 100 calls a day from people that we want to refinance you. I just like to give the piece of advice that to be careful. If you are paying anything for your refinance right now, it's probably not the right situation. And I'm happy to help and educate around that. But rates are going to continue to trend down. So if you're paying for that refinance right now, you're probably going to pay for another one in a few months or a year, and another one in a few months or a year, right? Like we're at that point where we could see, a couple points decrease over the next couple years. And so to step into that lower rate, minimizing your cost is going to be the best move for you. So don't knee jerk in at that and react at that either.
Right.
Make sure you're talking to somebody who understands that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good stuff. We went just a little bit past our half an hour, but not as bad as sometimes, so we can feel good about it.
It's actually really good for us.
That's right. We kept it in the 30 mark. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Chase. We appreciate you jumping on, all your input and advice. Folks, if you've got questions that you just want to get some answers to, no obligation, just reach out. We'd love to help. Our pace is your pace. We're not in a hurry to make anything happen. We just want to inform and educate and be there in the capacity that we can help you the best. So.
Yeah, not in a hurry, but the time is now.
Right. Absolutely.
From a data standpoint, man, make a move.
That's right. Well, thanks again, Chase. We appreciate you, and we'll wish everybody a blessed one. Thanks.
Talk to you later.